Um, my name is Julie Stevenson, and I'm with Colorado State University's Office of Engagement and Extension. I lead our marketing, communications, recruiting, and registration services focus, and we're really excited today to introduce some of our amazing partners within Colorado State and our office. They're part of our instructional design team, and I'm going to hand it over to them to take the lead. Christy Jerson Woods is an instructional design manager for our learner experience, and she focuses her work on really understanding the learner's experience through learning analytics and learner experience research and course design. And Jesse Thompson, also joining us today, is an instructional technologist. And so he really focuses on exploring and implementing learning technologies, as well as providing trainings and troubleshooting. So when I asked them and invited them and said, hey, many of us are going to be presenting at ACE, how do we help make it a great presentation for our learners, as well as consider some of the accessibility needs that we should be thinking about? So thank you everyone for joining. Throw questions in the chat, and I know that Christy and Jesse are also going to make this pretty interactive. And so I will turn it over to them.
Thank you so much, Julie. When you're seeing my screen, are you all just seeing the PowerPoint, or are you seeing the chat and then everything else? Just the PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. Thank you for the introduction, and Julie, thank you for inviting us. We're really excited to chat with you all today. As Julie mentioned, we're going to be pretty interactive with this session. So there's not a ton of us, there's 20 folks in the room. So feel free, you can come off mute. The chat is also going to be monitored, so feel free to add into the chat. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll be calling upon you throughout this presentation. And yeah, we'll be talking today about creating learner-focused, really engaging interactive sessions and digitally accessible presentations. And Jesse and I are going to kind of tag team this together, so you'll hear from both of us. Here's our beautiful welcome slide. You should have turned it when you were welcoming us, Julie. Sorry about that. So we'll start with an icebreaker. We always like to keep an icebreaker pretty light. So today, are you feeling more like a paper clip or a rubber band just today? And what reason? What makes you feel like more like a rubber band or a paper clip? You can put that in the chat. You can come off mute, whatever feels best for you. Yes, Julie, a rubber band stretched in a whole lot of directions. Stretched thin, says Michelle, or also a rubber band trying to hold everything together. Paper clip just trying to keep everything together. Same rubber band. Karen says paper clip holding things together. We got a lot of holding things together as a team here. It's wonderful. I always like to think about a rubber band. If I'm feeling more like a rubber band, which today I am, I'm kind of bouncing back. You know, you just take the punch and you keep going back to your original form. Paper clip trying to keep it all together. Yes, I love the analogies. Andrea says rubber band. The rain has been incessant, so it's been blowing and bouncing. Linda, rubber band, flexible no matter what happens. I love that, Linda. Oh, it looks like a lot of other folks like that too. You got some great emoji reactions in there. Great. Well, thank you for engaging in that icebreaker with us. Again, the icebreaker is just light, meant to keep you talking and using the chat. Looks like most folks really like the chat today, so please continue. You can ask questions in the chat. We've got those pulled up, so we're happy to answer throughout, and then I think we might have a few minutes at the end too to be able to answer. Okay. So if you ever worked with an instructional design team, we always love to start with our learning outcomes. And learning outcomes are really just what we hope that folks will take away from our time together today. So there are three main important pieces that we're hoping that you all attending this session will take away. The first is to really discover why. Why should you care? Why would you even think about learner-focused and digitally accessible presentations? We'll have the why embedded throughout. So we'll discover that together. The second is identifying and exploring some strategies for learner-focused presentations. So kind of take some different cues. We'll see why does that matter? That will come into play again. And our third, which Jesse Thompson, who will speak throughout this presentation as well, is our digitally accessible guru. So we'll consider some skills for creating inclusive presentations. So knowing that these are the learning outcomes, these are the things that we hope that you all will take from today's session. If you want to share in the chat what you're most excited about or interested in learning about today, we'd love to make sure that we hit on those key components in this session. So I'll give folks a few moments to share in the chat what you're most excited or interested about learning today.
Like Christy mentioned, this is one of the things that helps us as presenters focus on what the audience is looking for out of a presentation and where people are at, with the specific people that are in the audience.
Definitely. Looks like Julie's looking for some tips for engaging attendees, just not speaking at them. That's super important when giving any sort of presentation. Got a few thumbs up onto that one. So it looks like that's some other strategies that people are interested in as well. Brad shared that he's new to this, like to know what learner-focused presentations are. Great. Roxanne, anything ADA, so I can apply to all things I design. You will absolutely get that today, Roxanne. Okay, well, it looks like we're pretty aligned with the things that folks are excited for and what we're hoping to share today. So let's move forward. And this presentation is kind of broken up. The first half is focused on more of that learner focused and engagement. And then the second half is focused on the digitally accessible practices. So I mentioned that we're going to share about the why throughout. And it's important to start there. Why do we care? I just saw some folks mention accessibility and finding the right mix of how much to include, when to pivot to activities, etc. Love that. Thank you, everyone, for sharing in the chat. We care about learner-focused and digitally accessible presentations for a few different reasons. One, accessibility. There's some hard laws around that come into play, especially for communication professionals. So think about ADA, you can think about WCAG, and there's also some ethical considerations, something like I want everybody who's in the audience to be able to participate, no matter what their ability is, no matter what their cultural background is, how they identify. I want them to be a part of this, and I want to reduce barriers throughout. So there are some ethical responsibilities in there too, not just hard law that communication professionals adhere to, but also just thinking, how can we reduce any barrier to folks being able to not only attend our presentations, but participate fully. Of course, this is a communication excellence conference, right? We want to think about what is communicating excellently. So part of that is the digital accessibility piece, and part of that is the learner focused piece. And when we say learner focused, we talk about engagement, interaction, and not just sharing information. How can we get people engaged actively with what we're trying to share with them? So you want your participants to be engaged. You want them to take away whatever your learning outcomes are and be able to apply that into their own work as communication professionals going forward. So that's kind of the basis of our why. We'll come back to this several times. Jesse and I come back each time in this presentation, and we'll rediscover those together. So we'll move into learner-focused presentation strategies. But before we get there, we want to prep a little bit about what your presentations are for the ACE conference. When we're talking about prepping, we want to help to understand what is your topic and learning outcomes. So topic being maybe you too are presenting on accessibility practices in communication. Maybe it's web-based practices. That's your topic. And then your learning outcomes can always be framed as, what do you hope that your attendees, your participants will take away from your session? What's the whole point of your presentation that they should be able to do after you've spoken with them? So we want to understand what the topic and the learning outcome is for our upcoming presentation. My guess is you probably already know your topic. You've done a proposal of some sort, and you probably have some learning outcomes. So you can share those takeaways. We also want to consider your audience. This conference is in person, but right now you're in a virtual space. We're in Zoom. So what kind of format your audience is in is important, but other things like knowledge level of the topic that you're presenting on. When Jesse and I were sharing about this presentation, we were thinking about who's in the room with us. These are communication professionals. They understand things like ADA and WCAG. They understand, excellence in communication. So I don't necessarily need to start at the very bottom and more of the foundational understanding, because it's already there. It's already built into the audience. Demographics, same thing. It could be maybe you're looking at early career professional, and that's who your audience is hoping to be. So it's important to understand who your audience is, who you expect to be in the room. And then again, we want to go back to the why. Why do we care about learner-focused presentations? And really that goes back to the science of attention and memory. You have this beautiful topic. You've got some great learning outcomes. You know who's going to be in the room. You want people to be able to take what you've given them and apply it in some way, implement it in some way in their future. And in order to do that, they have to remember it. So we want to talk about attention. We want to talk about memory. And I don't know how many of you have ever been in a room where you've just been talked at for an hour. It's tough. It's so tough to just be talked at and to stay engaged. And it's even tougher to remember what was the big takeaway from that presentation. So think about, what do I hope people get from this session, and make that the big focus of your presentation. So just to get an idea of who's in the room, we'd love for you all to share what your topic for your upcoming presentation is, or you can share a learning outcome for that presentation. So topic or something that you hope people will take away from your session that you'll be presenting on in the upcoming conference. Beautiful. Thanks, Brad. Brad said in the chat, my presentation is about translating science. I want people to remove jargon from their writing. Yes, that's great. That's a perfect topic and a learning outcome for your presentation, Brad. Corey said what to consider and how to start planning for a website overhaul and refresh. Yes, that's a huge project, one that CSU is super familiar with. So great opportunity to really implement some strategies there that you want people to remember when they're considering that as well. Karen, I love that you're here, even though you're not presenting. Thank you so much. And I love that you'll share these tips to some other faculty and staff. So thank you. Michelle has a presentation titled Maximize Visibility of Your FFAR Grants, Fellowships, and Impacts by Leveraging FFAR Communication Teams. Amazing. Yeah, so you want them to be able to maximize their visibility. You want to leverage communication teams. Those are great learning outcomes as well. Does your writing need CPR? Sure, I love that. It's a play on words because it's cliches, punctuation, and redundancy. How to better serve underserved communities, understanding learning approaches for adapting to different audiences. Amazing, Julie. Cultural competency training, encourage communicators to be engaged. Awesome. So now that we have some ideas of the different presentation topics that you folks may need, you might think about your upcoming presentation and how you might apply the strategies that we'll talk together today about with learning focused strategies as well as digitally accessible strategies. So before we go into what strategies that you could consider, I'd love to hear what are strategies that you already use when you're presenting to engage your learners. The folks in the room, you could even use our presentation now. What are some things we've already done to engage folks in the room? Ask questions. Yeah, ask questions, receiving answers. And that's like transcendent upon format. It doesn't really matter if you're in the Zoom room, in person, if you've got hybrid, you can ask questions no matter what. It's just a different technology that you can use. Yeah, great point. Polls, absolutely. So far, Jesse and I have asked questions, and we've waited for some responses and looked at the chat to see what the responses are there. Making it conversational, inviting engagement throughout. Yes, definitely. You are all right on the right track. There is nothing so magical that it hasn't been discovered yet in terms of engaging your audience. We want to talk first about structuring content for maximum impact. So you all have already mentioned at the beginning of this, I don't want to just talk at people in my presentation. I want them to be able to apply these best practices. Maybe that's the cultural competencies. Maybe that's the CPR best practices. Maybe that's the website overhaul. So I want them to be able to apply it. I don't want to just talk at them. And that right there is a great strategy for engagement. Don't just talk at them. Have them apply it. So if there is something that you can bring in from their real world, for instance, what we're doing today, I'm having you think about presentations that you have upcoming and how we can apply these strategies to those presentations. You can think about that in your work as well. That's always going to be a helpful thing. The other piece to this is the power of storytelling and time blocking. And I have here this 10-2 rule, which is a loose rule. It doesn't have to be exactly 10 minutes and 2 minutes, but this kind of idea that you do 10 minutes-ish of content. So I'm kind of sharing throughout. And then I definitely, at the end of 10 minutes, if I haven't taken a pause to ask for questions or to engage engagement, in the chat or in the room, I haven't had folks talk to each other in the room, I want to take 2 minutes to engage them. So it's important for, again, I love what Andrea just said, look for opportunities to have participants to talk with each other. And if you design your presentation in that way, then you will absolutely have that time to take a pause. I love what Corey said. You have to be willing to wait for answers. You may have noticed I'm pretty good about willing to wait in the silence. Don't mind waiting there. And make sure that folks are engaging with the content there. So you can take a look at your presentation upcoming and say, I have X amount of content. Maybe I've got 40 minutes of content. I got to break it up every 10 minutes at the very least, but you can do more. We've already done multiple pieces of engagement in the chat, and we're only a few minutes in. So it's great to be able to do as much as you'd like. The other thing you could consider is storytelling. I'm not modeling necessarily the storytelling in this session, but you can model a concept with a story, and that's going to help them remember it. It's going to help trigger their memory to apply it later on down the road. So know that storytelling is a great strategy there as well. Okay, some of these learner-centered presentation strategies and skills have already been mentioned in the chat, but I want to call attention to them because sometimes we think that engagement and participation in presentations can feel pretty daunting. It's like, I just want my people to talk. It's the worst when people don't talk. And it's really easy to be able to engage folks in the session. So I think Corey mentioned already, like polls wasn't a great example, or just audience responses that was mentioned a few times, where you're just asking a question and waiting for a response. And this can be low tech, this could be no tech. If you're in the room with people, you can have them raise their hands That's no tech, and it's excellent to start with. If you're in a Zoom room, you can use the chat, which is what we've been doing thus far. You can also do polls within Zoom there as well. I saw that Brad had put in the chat. Interesting that you mentioned the 10-2. I was thinking 30 plus minutes of me presenting followed by 15 minutes of class presentation, but I like your idea much better. I think it depends on the topic, Brad. I think you will know your topic the best as the expert presenting on that and sharing that with others in your field. Sometimes you do have to get quite a bit of information out first just to kind of lay the foundation and then have them apply it. So you can use your best judgment there too. And also sometimes it is just breaking it up. So we got to keep people engaged with that too. Yeah, thanks for your comment, Brad.
And
go ahead, Jesse.
well, and it also kind of depends on what kind of conversation and discussion you're wanting them to have, right?
Totally.
Sometimes if you're asking your audience to have a real kind of deep conversation, go, really get into something, like with the wait time, like it takes people some time to, like, first they have to digest what you've said, think about it, and then start having a conversation or have questions. So it depends on what you're kind of wanting them to do with your questions. So, like, if it's something that process can happen pretty quickly with, it's good for those, like, okay, 10-2, quick little conversation, okay, back to, sort of kind of directly, instructing people, presenting in something. But if you're wanting to have a conversation about something that might take a lot more thought, they might have to digest a lot more, think a lot more, and then get into a deep conversation, it would be real appropriate to have, like, some other sort of engagement strategies during that 30 minutes, but then the 15 minutes of, okay, now we're really going to dive deep into something that could take a little while to get started. So yeah, just depends.
Yeah, great thoughts, Jesse. I really appreciate that. And for example, we have a session that we lead on our team that's a 2-hour, it can be anywhere between 90 minutes and a 2-hour session. It's a hands-on workshop in designing an online learning experience. So it could be an online course, could be a workshop, a training, and we have a lot of information we're sharing in that 90 minutes to 2 hours. And you might think, oh my gosh, 90 minutes, what a long meeting. But we are asking folks to design a course from start to finish. So we give them a little chunk of information and then we have them do the thing. And sometimes that thing takes a couple of minutes, like what Jesse said. And sometimes that thing takes 10 to 15 minutes. So we've got quite a big break in our presentation, but our audience is engaged. They're doing the things. They're actually tasked with filming during that presentation with their phones. So that's great. They're still really engaged and still learning what we're hoping that they'll learn. So exactly right, Jesse. I love what you just shared. And to say that to my last point about active learning on the screen, get people up and moving around. When you are at the ACE conference, you'll have an opportunity to have folks in person and at tables. So you can have different things like a table talk where folks come together and they share amongst their table. Maybe they get feedback from each other. It could be something like, oh, everybody that's at this table has to go find new partners at a different table. Let's split up and get us talking into different folks in the room. So yeah, and I know that was mentioned in the chat. We want people talking to each other too. And that's a great presentation strategy to keep people have that learner focused, learner centered engagement strategies. Okay, so I don't want you to share this in the chat quite yet, but I want you to think about, you have your upcoming presentation, or maybe you're just thinking about future presentations you might have in the future, right? It doesn't have to be for the ACE conference. But I want you to consider an upcoming presentation, an upcoming training that you might be giving. Think of ways that you could apply some of the strategies we've just chatted about, some of the ones that folks have shared in the chat. What could you do to engage your audience? Don't share in the chat quite yet, because we're going to do a different engagement strategy I want to share with you. But think about it, have it in your mind for a second. And then what we're going to do is called a waterfall chat. So what you'll do is type your answer into the chat, but don't hit send yet until I say go. And then everybody's going to share what they have to say all at once. And we can have all of these beautiful answers. So if you need the question again, I'm just going to go back one slide. The question is, well, the prompt is to consider what an upcoming presentation, it could be the ACE presentation or just another presentation that you have, and think of how you might apply some of these presentation strategies for engaging your audience. What might you do? Write that in the chat. I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds to write that. And then in 15 seconds, I will say go. All right, ready? Go. Amazing. Love it. Asking questions, ask people how many people have experience working with them so they know what they can improve. Ask audience to write down jargon, technical words, bingo card style activity. Ooh, I love that. Method of voting. Fake scenarios, ask people to separate into groups. Intro questions, polls to understand, polls, small group conversations. Ask if they recognize any of our examples, right? It could just be something as simple as camaraderie. I understand what it is that you're already sharing. Isn't that a great way to engage your audience and then also understand what their knowledge base is? Love it. So waterfall chat is just another way to bring in the chat. So if you find yourself in a Zoom room and you're asking folks to participate, that's another way that you can do it. It's a little bit fun. It doesn't really change the information that people are sharing, but can be a great way to engage folks. So I'll hand it over to Jesse and he'll share more around digital accessibility best practices.
Thanks, Christy.
Yes.
So I am going to, there's a lot of overlap between what Christy has discussed and what I'm going to talk about, but I'm really talking about how to ensure that our digital materials are so in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, a slide deck, a PDF we might be distributing, right? How our digital, to make sure that our digital materials are as accessible as possible. There we go. All right. So this is a representation of why digital accessibility matters, right? There are a couple things that you would need in order to know what I'm talking about here, know what this image represents, right? If you could not see what was on the screen, right? Or if, say, you don't know, does anybody know what this image is from? Anybody in the chat can identify? Yep, SpongeBob, right? So if you didn't know what SpongeBob was, right? That might make this inaccessible to you. If and not only is this a screen grab from a SpongeBob episode, there's also a meme around this image, right? So there are several different levels of things that you would have to be able to interpret and understand what's going on the screen right now. If you didn't have one of those things, you might just see, say we were in the room and people found it, people thought the meme was funny, right? You might just see people laughing, right? Hear people laughing, right? If you couldn't see what was on the screen, you wouldn't know why people were laughing, right? If you didn't know that this was a cartoon character, right? Like if you didn't have the reference to SpongeBob, you might not know why people are laughing. If you weren't familiar with the meme, you might not know why people are laughing, right? So giving things like providing descriptions, for example, of what is on the screen, right? Saying, and now we're looking at a meme from SpongeBob SquarePants where he is looking confused and a little bit surprised at the audience, right? Helps provide context and audio information about what is on the screen. All right. There are other ways that we can provide information to people without sight about what's on the screen, but describing them is one of them. Right. Christy has been modeling reading what's in the chat. Right. That is another way to provide what is happening in the chat in an accessible form to someone that can't see it or can't, isn't able to use a screen reader, for example, fast enough while the chat's moving, right? So just describing in your presentation what is on the screen is a helpful way of, and giving the context that might be needed for what's on the screen is a important way to make sure that everybody is able to access what you're trying to show them, right? So why digital accessibility matters is really overlapped with why this whole thing matters, right? We've got the legal requirements. We've got the ethical considerations, right? That yes, we have laws, but our laws tend to be based on some ethical guidelines, right? We have these laws because there are ethical reasons for following them. It does enhance engagement, right? It makes it so that you have less confusion. People understand what you're trying to get across and why, right? And it's just a form of best practices. And real quick to like sort of model a bit of the storytelling, when it comes to like the ethical considerations, I had a instructor come across my inbox that I had worked with in the philosophy department at CSU. And he had a student who had accommodations, so a legal requirement to provide accessible documents. But I was not the specific person that had the legal obligation to provide those accommodations. However, it was in order to get those accessible versions of documents to the student who was already a couple weeks behind. I decided the ethical thing was to make those modifications to the documents myself because I knew this professor, I knew how good his class was, and fundamentally what this comes down to is we don't want that student to miss out on something important, something valuable, something that they deserve to have access to because of something like a document that is not readable by a screen reader, right? So those are the kinds of ethical considerations that we're talking about, right? So some visual principles, right? There's a slide here that shows what some of the problems are, what some of the visual design problems can be. I don't know how good your eyes are, but I have trouble reading that first bullet point that says color contrast and color blindness considerations. The next bullet point says typography and readability. The third is actually an image. And I cannot tell what that image says. But Christy, do you want to go into the PowerPoint itself and demonstrate?
Yes, let me share.
Yeah. have to reshare. One of the things that I want to show here is that while some of these things that you can do to ensure accessible digital document, accessible digital formats is not always going to be directly apparent to you if it's not the sort of thing that you consistently have to use, right? So this image here, it's very hard for me to read. So I would need the alt text in this situation, but especially if you do not have sight, if you cannot read any of this on the screen, right? Because you simply can't see it, alt text will show up in a screen reader, right? So we can see here the alternative text, a green background with the words alt text for images, which should be a representation of a linguistic representation of what is conveyed by the image, right? We had alt text for the SpongeBob meme. Just wanted to show you there a way that there's the alt text for the SpongeBob meme. SpongeBob meme illustrating confusion and disappointment with the question, right? And those things might not be apparent to you if it's not a part of digital accessibility that you frequently have to access. But it is essential if someone is, say, using a screen reader to be able to tell, the screen reader may read text on the screen, but it won't be able to tell you what an image is unless there's alt text. What we've already been modeling, verbally explaining images, memes, jokes for context. It might sometimes feel a little awkward to like explain a joke. But that is the sort of thing that is not, there's not really a conflict, right, between what we're doing in terms of accessibility and to make sure that everybody has access to what we're talking about, and feeling like you are making your presentations are going to improve by doing these sort of things. They're not going to be hindered by these practices, right? It's just like when you have closed captions available, right? I can hear, but I like using closed captions, right? It is useful. It can be useful for everybody. So here's the slide in its proper form, right? Readable text, the font size is readable. We have white background, black text, or dark green text, right? The color there's software that will help you identify if your color contrast is accessible or not. But this is the appropriate version of the slide. Oh, we end at 1:45. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, don't forget your institution's brand guidelines, and also with a caveat that sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that those are accessible. And what I mean is that, for instance, at CSU, we're using our branded template, which is beautiful. It's already got accessibility built into it. But if we add anything to it, which you would, of course, because you're designing a presentation, you're going to have to update those accessibility practices within the presentation itself. And all of our brand colors aren't compatible with color contrast. So if I put, for instance, a light green over an orange, that's not going to meet color contrast, even though it would technically meet our brand guidelines. So just keep in mind, if you have brand guidelines, be sure to use those, but know that you still may have to do some additional accessibility work. And if you don't have those, then this is great. Just, overall universal visual design principles that you can apply.
Thanks. So while I haven't modeled great structuring of my own time in my presentation, I don't want to run too fast through these, but audio and video accessibility have another set of important features, right? Captions are an easy one. Captions and transcripts, right? Screen readers can access them. They help people who are maybe not blind, but are sight impaired. And it assists everyone's comprehension of video and audio. The visual audio descriptions, right? Christy and I are working on a class right now that has audio narration tracks for all their videos. That is a audio description of what is visually on the screen, right? So that's another addition of that you can either do live in your presentation or in recorded formats. And audio and video quality are really important, right? If there's a lot of fuzz or distance, I use a pretty decent mic here to try and assist with audio quality, just so that any difficulty hearing is not impeded by my microphone. So real quick, if you want to share in the chat what any concerns might be around implementing some of these practices, and then we have just a little bit about making PowerPoint specifically accessible. Visual audio descriptions. Yep. And there's a definite art to creating those descriptions. I spent quite a long time on our team doing a lot of creating alt text, and there's an art to it. Like, you can make it way too long, you can make it not informative enough. There's an art to giving a real good audio or textual description of something visual. Font size. Yeah, absolutely, Linda. So real quick, these are some just useful things to keep in mind when creating making sure that your PowerPoints are accessible. Headings and titles. That's something that can really easily be missed if you're not used to using those. But each slide can have a title. If it has no title, when you are using a screen reader to try and navigate, say, a PowerPoint presentation, you'll have no anchor to know what any slide is about. Right. So each of our slides, the large text is the title, so that you can easily navigate back and forth between slides and find the information you want. Using actual bulleted and numbered lists rather than just like typing the number 1, right? That actually assists with navigation. So instead of just typing the number 1, using the actual lists, having your titles be actually informative instead of slide 1, slide 2. When you use a hyperlink, like down at the bottom here, this Accessibility by Design website, you want to describe what you're linking to, not just HTTPS, ://. You want people to be able to read what they're going to. Except outside of hyperlinks, you don't want to underline things for emphasis, because that's something that a screen reader won't pick up on. And for the same reason, you don't want to use color alone for emphasis, right? Putting something in red will not show up to somebody when they're, say, using a screen reader. Things like bold and italics do, but color underlining doesn't. So that's just a important thing to know when you're trying to make a presentation accessible.
And Julie put in the chat the Accessibility by Design website. This is a great website that's at CSU, and it's got tutorials and how-tos to make sure that all different types of document styles are accessible, including PowerPoint. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'd love to make sure that I'm using informative titles, but I'm not quite sure what that means, this website is an excellent resource for you, and we'll walk you through the steps on how to do that.
So if you still got the time, consider your presentation that you're going to be doing coming up soon here, and think about if there's a particular accessibility practice for digital materials that you could implement. And Sherry, at Iowa State, we've been working on accessibility for what seems like forever, and yet I appreciate hearing some suggestions, especially what I can share with others who don't deal with this very often. Absolutely. Like, it's been important for me to interact with other people who are doing accessibility work, because there's There's certain parts of it that I think about because they really have an impact on me. And there's other parts that I don't think about as much because they're easier for me, right? Absolutely very valuable to, interact with other people about that stuff. Well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I hope there are some things that you can take away from this and employ. Um, yeah, Linda, I see your question about URLs. But I appreciate everybody's time here. We don't have to leave right away, but I understand if you have things that you need to get to. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Julie, and thank you for having us.
Jesse and Christy, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. I am curious if you all, Jesse or Christy, if you know the response, you responded. If it's a raw URL rather than a hyperlink, it'll read it. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's really important to not use like the HTTPS / blah, blah, blah URL. If you use the hyperlink, and the hyperlink means exactly what Julie's done in the chat, where it's a link with text. So like the Accessibility by Design website is linked in the chat, and the words Accessibility by Design show up with the link, but it's underlined and it's a different color so we can tell that it's a link. What happens is that if you're using a screen reader, they can switch to looking for any links on the presentation and navigate by link. So it's important that it's descriptive. So it's not just like link here or like PowerPoint or website. Those are really non-descriptive hyperlinks. So they wouldn't be able to tell necessarily what that goes to. So the more information you can include in the hyperlink will be better, but it will read out link Accessibility by Design, and then the student will be able to navigate, or the learner in the room will be able to navigate to that link specifically. Great question. There's also a question, if you put hyperlinks in the PowerPoint, how does anyone use them? You can use QR codes if you prefer people use them right then in the moment. So we've done like QR codes to a video that we want folks to watch. There are many QR code creators that are free that you can do. You can also just share a copy of the slides, and we've provided these. Julie, feel free to share these slides with the folks who might want to see this presentation. So you could even just share the PowerPoint and folks can be able to navigate it through there. Let's see, any other questions? I think that was it. So yeah, thank you. And thank you, Jesse, for being my co-collaborator in this space too. And thank you again, Julie, for inviting us. We're happy to chat. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But thank you again for your time.
Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see many of you at ACE, and Christy and Jesse, thanks for helping make us better presenters when we show up. Have a great day, everybody.